The hum of the diner faltered at table 7. A young man, barely out of his teens, leaned forward, his fingers grazing the air near the faint, jagged marks curling out from under Lena's rolled-up sleeve. "Whoa! What kind of accident left you looking like that?" His laugh cut through the clatter of plates, sharp and careless, his elbow nudging his friend, who snickered. Lena's hand tightened around the handle of the tea pitcher, the liquid sloshing faintly. Then a chair scraped across the linoleum behind her. "Kid." The single word sliced through the noise from the corner booth, where 3 men had been sitting, silent until now. The oldest, his face etched with lines like a weathered map, didn't raise his voice. "You're about to learn why some questions don't get asked." In less than a minute, the smirks would curdle into regret. The scars they mocked would turn into a mirror reflecting their own ignorance. And Lena, who'd spent years blending into the background of this small-town diner, would stand taller than she had since the day the desert exploded around her. Lena had a routine: keep the orders coming, the tea flowing, and eyes off her arms. The diner's short-sleeved uniform was non-negotiable, but she'd perfected the art of angling her body. Trays tilted just so, shoulders turned to hide the worst of the marks. 6 years had passed since the blast. 6 years of sidelong glances and hushed guesses from strangers. The rusty spoon, tucked off a quiet highway in Willow Creek, was supposed to be her refuge, a place where no one pried too deeply. Today, someone had. The man in the corner booth, his name tag reading Vance, wasn't staring at her scars. His eyes, sharp despite the years, were locked on the faint outline of ink peeking through the marred skin. "Ma'am," he said, his rough hand hovering an inch from her arm, careful not to touch. "That there, is that the 4th Brigade's emblem?" Her pen slipped, clattering onto the checkered floor. The table of boys exchanged grins. "What, like some biker tattoo?" One of them scoffed, his voice dripping with amusement. Vance's 2 companions, Torres with his inked fingers curling around a spoon, and Callahan with eyes that seemed to stare through the diner's faded wallpaper, both shifted in their seats. Torres spoke first, his voice low but clear. "That's no biker ink, that's a field medic's mark." Callahan's mug hit the saucer with a sharp clink, the sound echoing in the sudden hush. "Sullivan," he said, the name landing like a stone in Lena's chest. Her fingers darted to her sleeve, tugging it down on instinct, as if she could hide the past stitched into her skin. Vance rose slowly, his frame unfolding like an old oak, steady and unyielding. When he spoke, his words carried across the diner. Quiet, but heavy enough to silence the hum of conversation. "These kids think they're mocking scars." He tapped his own arm, where faint faded lines of ink lay beneath his own weathered burns. "They're mocking the day she carried 11 souls out of a firestorm." The young man's smirk vanished, his face paling under the fluorescent lights. Lena's breath hitched, memories clawing their way to the surface, the acrid sting of smoke, the weight of a soldier's limp body slung across her back, the blinding heat of the second explosion ripping through her world. "I didn't save them all," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper, lost in the hum of the diner's ceiling fan. Vance's hand lingered near her elbow, not touching, but close enough to feel like an anchor. "No one ever does," he said, his tone soft but firm, like he'd stood in her shoes too many times. The diner seemed to hold its breath. Lena's fingers hesitated, then slowly pushed her sleeve up, revealing the full tattoo. The 4th Brigade's angular crest, the caduceus of a medic, and the date of that brutal day etched in stark black. Callahan let out a low whistle. "Damn, you're the medic from the papers." The college kid's jaw slackened, his friends shifting uncomfortably in their seats. We didn't know," he stammered, his voice small. Torres leaned forward, his eyes glinting. "Now you do." The diner's air felt thicker now, the clink of cutlery and low hum of voices fading into a heavy silence. Lena stood frozen, her exposed arm a map of survival under the dim glow of the rusty spoon's lights. The college kid's eyes darted to the floor, his friends slumping in their booth, their earlier bravado dissolved. Torres was already pouring more tea into Vance's cup, his movements deliberate, as if grounding the moment. The boys shuffled, gathering their things. Their plates barely touched. A crisp $100 bill lay tucked under the receipt when they left, a quiet admission of guilt. Callahan caught Lena's gaze as she moved to clear the table, his voice low but steady. "They'll carry this longer than you will." His words hung there, not a comfort, but a truth. Lena's fingers brushed the raised edges of her scars, not to hide them this time, but to trace their story. For years, she'd kept them covered, kept herself small, dodging the stares and the questions. But now, standing in the middle of the diner, she felt the weight of her own history settle differently, not as a burden, but as something solid, unapologetic. Outside, the late afternoon sun spilled across the gravel lot, glinting off the chrome of parked trucks and the diner's chipped sign. Lena stepped toward the window, her reflection faint in the glass. For the first time in years, she didn't flinch at the sight of her own arms. The scars, the ink, the date, they weren't just reminders of loss. They were proof she'd walked through fire and carried others with her. She let the sunlight catch her skin, let it shine where she'd once hidden. As she turned back to the counter, wiping her hands on her apron, a small smile tugged at her lips. Maybe she'd remember this day, too. Not for the shame